Welcome to Building Resilient Strategies with ILS. And my name is Gareth Nicholson.
And my name's Mandy Cannell.
Today, we're going to be looking at different things to build your workplace resilience. Starting off with a 4C model of resilience, then going into developing a healthier lifestyle, the impact of life events and external influences, recognizing common reactions to stressors, building strategies for persistence, and overall strengthening your resilience factors. So I'm going to ask a little question of you, Mandy, and indeed you guys at home as well. And please have a little look at the list and tell me what resilience means to you.
Yes, so looking at the options on the screen there really quickly. So A, the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. Yeah, probably agree with that one. B, the ability to never fail or admit mistakes. Well, for me, that's not what resilience is about, because we can all make mistakes and we all have failures in life, things that don't quite go according to plan. So if you were some superhuman who never ever failed or made mistakes, well, I think you'd be pretty special. I think that's something we all actually do. C, the ability to mentally or emotionally cope with a crisis or to return to pre-crisis status quickly. Yeah, I'd say that's that kind of ability to bounce back, and that's what resilience means to me. And D, the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. Again, it's that adaptation, that ability to be a little bit flexible with your approach so that you can deal with whatever sort of issues that you encounter. And then the final one, E, the ability to cope with whatever life throws at you and bounce back. That's kind of it in a nutshell for me, I think, resilience.
Absolutely. So we had a quick look here at what we could find online about resilience. This is one of the studies that was done in deprived communities, and they were saying that the most resilient people are able to cope with the difficult things that happen in life, similar to what we're going through at the moment with COVID-19. And the factors that they showed are listed below. So confidence, intelligence, problem solving, having a positive outlook, and being forward thinking. Now, I think when we're talking resilience and having coping with setbacks, like you said, Mandy, you definitely can see these traits coming out in things that you see. How do you think you're coping with the COVID-19 situation at the moment? Do you see these things coming together for you?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I try my best to have a positive outlook, and as we probably all try to. It's hard at times. Let's not be, beat about the bush. It's quite tricky, and sometimes we're going to have times where we feel a little bit negative. But overall, I definitely try to have a positive outlook, and I think that's probably me generally in life, though. To be honest with you,
So how
um,
do you
I
think you got those
def-
traits then through life?
I think it's kind of practice, really. It isn't one of those things. I think it's a bit of a misconception that people believe you're either a positive person or a negative person. All the evidence from psychological studies actually show that we can develop a positive outlook at something that with practice we can change our thinking, we can change our behaviors. So yeah, I think it is kind of practice, isn't it? It's over time, it's experience.
So you say you're not
Having that
born
kind of
with it.
forward, I don't think you are. No, I really don't. And it's not just me that thinks that. The evidence suggests that
Yeah,
that you definitely can develop it. So even if you feel that you're a little bit negative person, it's something that you can work on. You can get better at.
excellent. So this
I
is the
think.
4C model of resilience. There's loads of different models online, but this is the one I find is particularly works well. It looks at concern, control, curiosity, and confidence. Now we're going to go through these one by one because I think they are quite good to look at. And we'll start off with concern. So these are things that should give you little flags to say, okay, I'm in a situation like COVID-19, in a lockdown, in a place where possibly I don't have the resources I would have in a workplace. And it challenges you to look at things a little bit differently. So we're thinking about the future and what that might hold, for example, realizing the implications of today's choices for my future, So this is all about having a look to see what's available outside. This situation we're in at the moment is definitely only a temporary thing that we're going to go through. We are going to go back to normal eventually, but we can use this time in two different ways that I can see it. We can either sit down and just carry on as we were and try to manage day to day, or we could plan for the future. And I think that's really important, and it's a trait that we see in the most resilient people.
Yeah, going back to your first slide, Gareth, it was on there as one of the key components was being forward thinking and having that positive outlook, and that definitely involves kind of planning. And I think when it comes to your career, having some goals in mind, having a plan for your future, it is a great idea. And I think always with retaining that bit of flexibility, because we never know what's going to come along and what's going to happen, but just having a sort of main goal in mind is a really good idea.
Mm. So tell me, what do you think about preparing for the future or becoming aware of choices around?
Yeah, I think it is. It's about exploring your options, really. It's thinking about what's my main goal? What am I trying to achieve? In this particular case, we're talking about your work and your career, but it could be other goals that you have in mind, life goals and so on.
Mm.
Goals to do with family and learning new skills and so on. But it is kind of doing that bit of exploration as to, well, what kind of options do I have? What are the possibilities for me? Are there things that I can do that can fit in with um, the other things that I have to do that fill my time, family, friends, other commitments, and so on. So it is definitely exploring that, but always with that main goal in mind.
Nice. And then actively engaging in my career. That's become a lot more difficult, would you say, now that we're working remotely, maybe in an unfamiliar environment, and then also the resources that we have to hand. I mean, we're in a situation that I don't even have a printer at home and things like that. So how can you get
Yeah.
past that planning stage then and actively engage in these things?
So for me, that goes back to, again, the first slide that we had, one of those traits that people who have that sort of resilience tend to demonstrate is that ability to adapt and to really kind of look at what they have to problem solve in a really creative way, to think about, okay, this actually could be an opportunity for my career. It could be an opportunity for me to take more initiative, because all of a sudden I have to be much more self-reliant than perhaps I have been in the past. I don't have a teammate sitting next to me. I don't have my manager on call 24/7. These things are a little bit more tricky. I don't have the resources around me than I might have had ordinarily. So it's maybe thinking a little bit outside the box. What can I do a little bit differently that will still push me towards that part of my career? I think we all learn quite early on in our working lives that actually the only person who drives and manages your career is you. You're the one who has ownership of that. You've got people who might support you along the way, but it's absolutely up to you to drive that and to take the initiative.
Yeah. So that's the first C that we were looking at. The second one goes into control. So this is really about what you were saying about the ownership, about how you're the person who can drive this forward. And this is what we see in the most resilience of people. So making decisions on my own and relying on myself. I mean, that's something that we're increasingly being asked to do when we're working in isolation, would you say?
Yeah, and it might not be everybody's preference. It might be a little bit new to some people. Some people might be quite an early stage in their career, perhaps that they've taken on a new role fairly recently, or they've had a shift in career. So it can be quite a tricky thing to do. But I think within what you're able to do, just challenge yourself and think about, how can I make some of these decisions by myself? If you don't feel 100% confident, there's usually somebody out there that you can check with. You can sort of get a second opinion on, whether that's a colleague or your manager or just a trusted sort of friend or family member even.
Absolutely, and it's doing what's right for you. That's one of the things that we see on the list here. It's really making that choice for you. Position. Let's be fair. That well, we've done our study. Maybe we've gone to university, or some of us have even just come straight from school into the workplace, and we've found our place in our job, and we're doing that role, and we possibly have had a few changes along the way. But this is a real time where we can make those decisions to say, okay, am I happy what I'm doing? Is there any other options out there? And it might be with the company that you're with at the moment. It's definitely worth asking the questions of yourself. Is that fair?
I think it's true, we're definitely in a position where perhaps we have a little bit more time for reflection and to kind of process things and to ask ourselves questions. Is that almost taking stock, isn't it? Sort
Mm.
of assessing, where am I now? Is this where I want to be? Where might I want to be in the future, in the next 12 months, 2 years, 5 years even? And really kind of taking the time to think that through and make a conscious decision about what you're going to do and whether that's right for you. Because you're quite right, a lot of us just kind of fall into our careers. It's not something we necessarily set out in a very deliberate way to do. And we can find ourselves sort of faced with decisions, and we accept sometimes opportunities and so on without really assessing it. The best decisions are always made when we really take the time and trouble to do that bit of assessment and to really think things through. So
Absolutely.
absolutely, always keeping that in the back of your mind.
And I suppose when you're asking those questions of yourself, the next thing on our list is acting in line with your values and principles. Those will naturally come up, and things that you can say, okay, is this really what I want to do? Does this, do I believe in this project that I'm looking on? Whether that's study, whether it's a new career path, whatever it is.
Yeah, your values and principles are kind of core to everything that you do. And do you know where sometimes you feel that people feel out of step with an organization? It often boils down to the fact that their values and principles are out of alignment with the values and principles of the organization. So it is, constantly assessing that. And if we're looking for a new career or our next step, it's thinking about what kind of organization, what kind of role am I looking for that would really align with what's important to me.
And then the final one that we'll look at, remaining positive. Now, how difficult is that in the environment that we're in at the moment? With all the news that's going on, how do you remain positive and think about the future when everything with the COVID-19 is happening at the moment?
It is really tricky, isn't it? And do you know something that you'll sort of touch on a little bit later is certainly it's the temporary nature, as you said. I think we're hanging on to that at the moment and understanding that okay, things might be tough at the moment. We might be in a position where we're really struggling to balance all the varying demands on us. Where all of a sudden might be in a house which also doubles up as our workspace and is also our childcare. It's our teaching environment as well. It's a huge number of varying demands on us. So it can be a struggle to remain positive. I think we kind of have to go easy on ourselves a little bit and
Yeah.
recognize there will be times when we struggle, and that's okay. But it's okay also to reach out for help to somebody.
So I think also that when we're talking about making these changes and looking at these different things, asking questions of ourselves, we're not expecting to do it in a super fast time. We're just asking people to start this ball rolling in the time that we've got now. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's just if you do have a little bit of time to reflect, it's making the most of that and really sitting down and kind of assessing where you are, what you want from your future, and start to do a little bit of that thinking and planning now.
So the next one is the curiosity. So this is the naturally next stage on the cycle, but often one that's missed out. So this is really taking it to the next step. We've had a think about what we want to do is change. We've explored little options. We've seen how possible it is. We've asked questions of ourselves. Am I able to do this? Now this is really important because it's looking not just at ways of doing it, but also contacts around you that you can get support of. I think sometimes when we're in the work environment or taken away from that work environment, I should say, it seems that you're on your own, you're doing everything on your own, but that's not true, is it?
Absolutely not. You're still part of a team. It might be a virtual team, but it still is a team, and it's one that you should reach out to in whatever way is useful for you. So, mentor relationships can still continue, as can relationships with colleagues and managers as well. So it's absolutely using the people around you to buoy you up, and perhaps even on the times when you're feeling a little less positive or you're feeling a bit stuck, it's using those people around you to really help you and to help you to look forward as well, to get a bit of advice as to what might my next step be? What kind of opportunities are out there? What sort of things have you done that you found useful? And what worked for you? Absolutely looking at the people around you and using them as inspiration.
Absolutely, and I think it's given us a chance, really. That I know it's a little bit strange working from the home environment, but it does give us a different opportunity to see how other people are doing things, and then that gives us the opportunity to be able to ask the questions: How are you doing this successfully? What sort of things? It's like us doing this session here today. We wouldn't have done this unless the opportunity that we're in. That's right.
Yeah, it's really pushed us kind of probably a bit out of our comfort zone, if we're really honest, and it's something that's accelerated a plan that we already had in place. So we've had to do in a matter of sort of weeks what we had planned to do in months. However, it has really pushed us to be curious and to explore the options, to understand a little bit about how we can do this, and kind of reach out and look at kind of some other people who are doing similar type of things and running webinars and how they do it, and taking inspiration from the ones who do it really well. So yeah, being curious about it absolutely is a very positive and very kind of forward thinking aspect of our psyche, I think, to be able to be curious and to grow. And going right back to your first slide as well, it's an aspect of our intelligence, isn't it? Being curious is one of those aspects of intelligence. Demonstrate constantly asking questions and looking for the next opportunities, to grow as a person, to grow professionally.
So I'll ask a question. You've identified that there's an opportunity. You've done a little bit of exploring to see if it's possible, and now we're on this stage. We're going into a little bit more detail. We're probing a little bit more. What have you find at that stage? Oh, yeah, absolutely, it's not going to work. Can you revisit other stages with a different route? Go backwards?
Absolutely, I think you should definitely see this as a cycle. Yeah, yeah, you can go back a step, you can go forward a step, you can repeat the cycle as well. So it's something that absolutely is one of those things that will be a continuous process, if you like, because with the best laid plans, things happen that we're not, we haven't sort of planned for. Things like COVID-19 come along, and all of a sudden our plans are sort of thrown off course a little bit, or perhaps we have a wobble. So being able to retain that flexibility in your planning, that flexibility to be able to adapt your plans and to go back and revisit stages as well, absolutely is one of the things we should do.
So we're going on to the last part of it. So this is really important part as well. So this is all about confidence to actually take it to the next step. So after we've got that plan in action, we feel that we've got support. We might have explored opportunities that our work colleagues are doing, as you were saying. Maybe it's our family that are giving us the support through this time. Maybe it's learning a new skill online, for example. Then how do we get the confidence to push it through? We've got a good list here to say that, yes, we need to overcome obstacles and solve a problem that refers back to the first one. But how do you physically do it when you could be quite isolated?
Well, I think we're really lucky with technology at the moment. That has just kind of enabled us, even if we are, sitting at our dining table at home, we're, in a spare bedroom, in a corridor, Gareth, as you are at the moment. We're lucky that we've got technology so that we can explore our options. We can do something about that, and we can reach out to the people who might be helpers and supporters of us to move us forward to the next step. Now, conscious that for everybody, not everybody will have the opportunity to move things forward right now. However, there's nothing to say that you can't make plans for when things start to get back to normal. So your plan might be, when things get back to normal, I am going to do X, Y, Z in September, in December, next year. It might be that sort of planning that you're doing at the moment, and it's developing the confidence and sort of fleshing out as much as you can the plan, solving the problems, working through things, and trying to anticipate what might come your way as an obstacle. You can do all of that kind of groundwork, if you like, right now, and be ready for when things do get back to normal.
And I suppose some of the, well, not obstacles, some of the barriers you might have to come to be able to work in your full potential might be things like, well, I've got a family working downstairs or in the next room to me. So if I need to get my full potential out of this, I need to put a plan in action for them as well. So maybe have, say, because I'm working today, I need to put a plan of action to keep them busy for that time.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It is. It's kind of really thinking about not just your work in isolation, but alongside. And I think even when you get back to normal as well, you know, if you're planning to do some extra study, for example, that's going to cut into your time. So you've always got to consider this. Um, you know, in amongst everything else you've got going on in your life, and how's that going to work? How am I going to balance things? What kind of plan can I put in place that might enable me to do that?
So the next model we're going to look at would certainly have an impact on how resilient we are. This is life's ups and downs. It's situations that we're not really prepared for, we haven't got a plan for. And I'd definitely say with what we're experiencing at the moment, we wouldn't be in one of those high points, we would definitely be in one of the low troughs.
Yeah, I would agree. It's one of those things that, you know, we're not prepared for, we haven't had training for. It's one of those things that's hit us really rapidly as well. It's a massive change. So for a lot of people, I think it will be a trough. You know, not everybody, some people might be coping quite well, but for a lot of people, it's really altered their situation. They might be dealing with hardships they've never experienced before. So yeah, for a lot of people, it would definitely be a trough.
Absolutely. Now, so this model, what we look at is, it's usually blank. This is a filled one in for ease. And if you're doing this at home, you could chart out your own. It's quite easy access to follow. But what we're saying is these ones are generally things that people will come across. So the high points in life, making the school team, maybe passing your exams or getting a new job. Even marriage is listed as a high there. Now that can be debatable either way. And then on the bottom in the troughs, these are things that people are finding hard that has an impact on the way they cope things, impact on their well-being. And this is what really shapes our resilience, how we manage to get out of these situations, how we manage to get back up onto the chart again. So it's even starting school. When we first dropped off in front of the gates, that feeling of dread, unexpected, and not unknowing what's going to be through those doors when we walk through it, leaving our parents behind. Those things stay with us for life. And then as we carry on through life, there's different things that will come up, but we usually find a pattern of behavior through everybody that would follow this type of thing. So leaving school, moving up into the big school, for example, going again into new classrooms, leaving our safety blanket of the class that we've been in for years behind. That's also quite one of those moments. And even the death of a parent, these are the things that are unexpected, we're not really prepared for. Something like this comes along and it can really have an impact on our well-being. What I will say is sometimes when we're in one of these troughs, it could feel like it's a forever thing. But as you can see, if you've mapped out your life's ups and downs, it isn't like that. It's only a temporary thing that we're going to be facing here. And this is what we're going through at the moment. It's a temporary adjustment that we're facing with COVID-19. We won't be working from the corridor forever. We will be back into the workplace at some place. It sometimes feels really difficult to get out of those troughs. So it's worth revisiting times that you've had before to say, okay, what made me resilient to that? How did I get myself? Was it just time? Was it support from family members or friends? Was it my behaviors, my actions that got me out of those things? And these are type of, it might be able to help you along to be more resilient and be able to take on these extra challenges that we're hoping for you to do.
So yeah, this is such a versatile model, and it's one that you can use equally with your career as well. So if you're thinking about your career resilience, why not have a go at mapping out your career timeline? So think about the various jobs, the various roles that you've had in terms of highs and lows, and think about what made the highs enjoyable. What did you get out of them? And what about the lows? What didn't you like about those? What made them a low? Because that can really inform your future choices for your career as well. So such a useful exercise to do.
So this brings us to what actually happens in the brain when we're faced with these life's ups and downs. It harks back to the days of early man and our responses when we approached by danger, flight, fight, freeze response, it's known as. And what happens to our body when we have these many different stresses going on is that we release chemicals to prepare us to cope with that danger. One of them being adrenaline and the other one cortisol. Adrenaline's fine, that still has purpose now, and it still helps us get up and take on these tasks that are in front of us. But cortisol is less needed nowadays. It's referred to as the stress hormone, and there's quite a good reason for that. Now, they're released from the adrenal glands at the back of the lower back, and the chemicals quickly rush through the body as a surge to deal with the danger in hand. Now, what cortisol does, unfortunately, has quite a negative impact. Now, in our brain, we have what you see on the screen here, that's a neuron. We've got 86 billion of these, so we're not short of them. However, at the end of these neurons, you'll see these wispy lines coming off them. They're called dendrites or axons. And at the very end of those, there's a little gap, which is called the synapse. And that passes on electrical information to another neuron. It's how we process thoughts, our actions, our behaviors, all different things are led through this process. When we face danger and cortisol is released into our body, what actually happens is that these axons and dendrites shrink and they contract. And when that happens, the gap between the synapse becomes larger and larger to a point where the information won't pass on to the next neuron. That's quite a negative thing. So if the information is not getting there, it needs to find another route. Now it will find another route because there's 86 billion neurons, so we don't have to worry too much about it. However, what that will come out as, and it's explained quite really, is the information is delayed getting to the next neuron. It's got to find another route. Best way to put it, have you ever walked into a room and thought, what did I come in here for? That's that process.
It's to me all the time, Gareth.
It's that process in action. It's not getting there. Now, as we've said, it will find another route through another axon or dendrite, and the information will get there, but there are definitely gaps. And this is what will have an effect on our brain. This is what affects our mental health and our well-being. You'll see this happen. And it's not just one neuron that will be affected by the cortisol, be quite a few at a time. So you can imagine that if we're facing a difficult time, as we are at the moment with COVID-19, and we're facing some more of these life's ups and downs, these events are happening more and more often, and it becomes increasingly harder to deal with it. Now, it's not all bad news, because there's some good chemicals we can have that will do some repair work. So the main ones that we know work would be dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin. Any idea how we would get those, Mandy?
Lots of natural ways to get those, because obviously if somebody is taking antidepressants, that's kind of a way of redressing that, but actually lots of really natural ways that we can do that through natural exercise, for example, through kind of social contact as well, petting a dog even, that's one of our favorites, isn't it, Gareth?
Absolutely.
Yeah, lots of ways that we can get that, thankfully.
So when we're talking about early intervention and prevention, this is key to get this good chemicals in, because if we're putting ourselves under increasing pressure, we're learning new skills, we're not quite sure about our environment we're working in, these are all going to have a negative impact on our thing. It's a physical thing that's going to be happening in our brain. So to have the good chemicals is especially important right now. Equally, as we know that there's studies that have been done that says if we're already doing exercise, if we're already producing these good chemicals, we can actually build a resistance for when things go bad.
Yeah, that's such a good point to make, isn't it? That this is not something we should just leave until we are stressed, until we are dealing with difficult situations, but something we should kind of build into our usual habits, our way of life, and because it does give us that little bit of protection.
Absolutely. And if we're looking after our well-being, we're looking after our chemicals that are coming into us, into our body, into our brain, then we'll be better off in the long run. So these challenges that we're trying to encourage you to take on will be a lot easier.
So we're going to turn our attention to a piece of psychology from an author called Carol Dweck. So she wrote a book back in 2007, The New Psychology of Success, which looked at mindset. And she proposed that there are two different kinds of mindset. And whichever mindset you choose to adopt really does impact your resilience. So that's why we're looking at that here today. So we'll start off with the first mindset, which is a fixed mindset. Now, Dweck described this as the kind of mindset where the person would feel that intelligence is static, it's fixed, it's something that can't really grow or be developed over time. Somebody who holds a fixed mindset might also be one of those people that likes to think they know everything, likes to look smart, look as though they are sort of in tune with what's going on. And then they therefore tend to avoid challenges. They rather, they don't want to look as though they're making a mistake or could possibly fail in any way. So they rather avoid the challenges. And if they are asked to take something on and they don't succeed at it immediately, then they would give up quite easily. They would see effort as something not really worthwhile, and feedback as something that should be ignored, something that might be harmful rather than something that might be helpful. And if others are successful around them, they see that as a threat to themselves personally. So somebody who holds this fixed mindset has quite a rigid view of the world, and that tends to lead to them not being able to achieve their full potential because they don't really want to focus on learning new things, on growing, on sort of developing that kind of flexibility and adaptability in their outlook. So they have quite a deterministic view of the world.
So if you recognize a few of these things on this list, is it a forever thing, or are you able to change these things?
Absolutely not. And if we move on to a growth mindset, actually, there are things that we can learn from that and we can adapt. There's no reason why, if we think, yeah, okay, I might be guilty of some of those traits of a fixed mindset, there's no reason why we can't learn and put effort into developing a growth mindset instead. It is absolutely one of those things that we can learn and we can develop. So if this is what we're aiming at, let's have a look at it then. A growth mindset, somebody who holds that, believes that intelligence can be developed, that learning is a good thing, that growth is a positive thing to harness in life. So this tends to be a much more flexible and adaptable mindset. So when we're talking about resilience, having that flexibility and that adaptability and that desire to grow and to learn new things can really be a useful trait to have. Because somebody who has a growth mindset will seek out and embrace challenges. They'll look for new things, new ways of doing things. And if they don't have success, they won't immediately decide not to do it again, but they will actually persist. They'll try it again. They'll try a different way. They'll learn a different way to problem solve, for example. And they definitely see effort as something that's worthwhile. That if I put the effort in, I can get better. I can improve at something. They see feedback as a positive, something that they can actually learn from. So something that teaches them something about the way they are in life and how they might do things better. And when others are successful, they actually take inspiration from that. They learn from other people around them. So they might have a mentor, a coach, people, peers, and so on, or managers that they learn from. So what does this actually lead to? Well, a higher sense of achievement and actually a greater sense of free will as well. It's actually something within my control to get better, to learn, to be adaptable, to be flexible. So if we hold this growth mindset, then we're likely to have a higher level of emotional and career resilience.
So we've got learning from feedback. If we revert back to the previous slides where we were talking about people, the physical thing that happens in our brain, if we're finding things difficult and we're not looking through things properly, if there's gaps in our memory maybe, or we're having trouble sleeping, I could imagine that it would be quite easy to see negative in feedback. How do you take that negative and turn it into a positive?
It's such a tough thing to do, isn't it? And do you know, part of us will probably feel that initial little bit of a, oh, I didn't quite like that. That felt critical, or you know, I might want to kind of avoid that, or I might actually even want to be a little bit argumentative, not accept that. Um, but it actually takes that little bit of time to process that, and that pause to actually really think about what's being said, and to try and understand, to ask questions, to try and understand what's going on, and to learn from that, to see it as a learning opportunity. So it does take a little bit of time and effort to get to that point, certainly, because as you saying, you know, our initial instinct might be that, oh, I don't like this feels a little bit uncomfortable, it's not something pleasant, it's, you know, something that I might want to shy away from. But you know, it's part of that growth mindset to actually embrace that, to pause and to think, well, what can I learn from this experience?
So this is a nice little model that we've found. It's the Worsley's resilience donut, and I think this pulls everything in quite well together. When we're talking about family and close relationships, we're talking about the negative impact on our mental well-being, having adequate sources for emotional support, whether it's from family members at home, whether it's from friends, or even indeed people at work. And these are the things that we really need at this time, isn't it, when things are quite a little bit strained.
Yeah, absolutely. That, you know, keeping that social interaction at the moment, it might be really tough, but actually we know from studies that this is one of the things that people who are resilient have in common. They have those kind of strong family and close relationships, people they're able to lean on when times are tough. You know, they don't feel they have to go through it on their own. There are people around them that can support them through that.
And I suppose that brings the question that when we're having these one-to-one meetings or even group meetings, we should build into some of that somewhere along the line. How are you coping with everything?
Absolutely. And, you know, this is not exclusively about work, of course, this is about family relationships, but certainly at work, you know, having that, building in that time to talk about how you're doing, if times are tough, if you're going through something that is particularly difficult, is really crucial. And, you know, the same with your family and close relationships. It's when you have the time to speak to people like that, it's asking after their welfare, asking how they're doing, how they're coping, do they need any help? Absolutely one of those things that we should be building into our conversations.
And then moving on to the next one, skills. The point that they've got here, have you identified your skills and recognize your strengths? I suppose this brings back to, if you're going to take on extra study, it's got to be something that you're going to be successful at. Otherwise, what's the point in doing it? For example, if I wanted to learn another language right now, it wouldn't really be a benefit to me or my career. Is it worth asking people what your strengths are and how they see you take on the challenges that you want to do?
Yeah, definitely. And you know, we probably all got an idea of what our strengths are, but it's always good to get another view, another opinion, an outside view, because people might spot things in you that you hadn't necessarily realized yourself. And, you know, we're not just limiting ourselves to skills in relation to our work and our career, but often, you know, for some people, career isn't the be all and end all. A job is something that, you know, as we said before, might just be something to help pay the bills. And actually, they have some interests that lie outside of work. So whether that's a sport or whether it's a hobby, it's a craft, it's something additional that somebody might have in their wheelhouse that actually is the thing that fires them up, that motivates them. So it's understanding that, and it's developing that as well. It's thinking about the breadth of skills that you have and how you might develop those over time as well. So whether that's gardening or baking, or as I said, you know, sport, or any number of things, it could be anything. But having the ability to develop those skills, we know is great for our resilience. And it also means that we're not a one-trick pony. So we're not kind of putting all our eggs in one basket. We don't have just one thing that we're good at, because the danger, of course, is that if things go wrong with that particular thing, then it really has a massive impact. Whereas if we've got a breadth of different skills, both in work and outside of work, different things that we can rely on, then it's much more, it's a better influence, if you like, on our resilience.
Absolutely. The next point we've got is learning and education. So if you're going to take on these challenges, I think it's a good idea to test yourself on those growth mindset key points that we had listed there. You could almost do a RAG status, red, amber, green, point out things that you're good at and work on things that you might think that you need a little bit of support. But also, again, using your friends, your families, your co-workers around you, you could ask them to do a RAG status on how they see you and what points they think that you need to work on as well.
Yeah, it's good. And it, you know, as you said quite rightly, it is all about that sort of developing that growth mindset. It is developing that flexibility and adaptability as well, knowing that, you know, things won't always be fixed. They won't always stay the same. As we know right now, you know, Gareth and I, we've had to really quickly upskill on using technology and presenting in a different way. So it's just having the ability to retain that flexibility does definitely influence your resilience greatly.
And then personal resource. This is probably one of the most important ones for me, I think. It's going back to that. You have to be in the right frame of mind. You've got to be in the right zone. You have to look after your well-being if you're going to make any success out of these things.
Yeah, definitely. And it's making sure that everything is aligned really, and you're taking care of things, you know, for yourself. We talk about self-care a lot, a bit of a buzz phrase at the moment, maybe, but certainly is. And that's thinking about things like your finances. Do you have everything organized in the way that you can? Are you making the most of the opportunities you have for your finances and your physical and mental well-being as well? Are you looking after those things and really paying attention to them and thinking about what personal resources you have? Doing that now, and if you even before you're struggling, really is an important thing to do. It's just keeping an eye on these, revisiting every now and then as well.
Absolutely. And then the community and career networks. We've talked quite a lot about having this peer support, having a mentorship option. It's being more difficult, without a doubt, working remotely. But I think everybody will be getting attuned to doing this type of conferencing, talking to people over the internet. Are we strictly talking about people inside your own work or your own family network, or what's the best way to explore that?
Well, I think as with, you know, skills, having that breadth of different networks that you can call on is so important. And, you know, whether that's to do with your career, and that might be professional networks that you belong to, both inside your work, but outside as well, because there are always new things that you can learn from that. And also sort of retaining that little bit of flexibility. I mean, the career that you have today with the organization you work for today might not be the career and the organization that you work for forever. So retaining again that flexibility and that adaptability, maintaining those career networks is vital. And the same with community networks. I mean, we talk about churches, we talk about other groups that you might belong to as well. We talked earlier about skills, you know, whether that's a gardening group you belong to, whether it's a group on Facebook to do with a shared interest you have, but just again, developing a breadth of relationships like that gives you additional people, additional things that you can rely on when times get tough. So it definitely feeds into your resilience.
Yeah, and the final one on our list was all about work. It's all about you, the environment that you're in, which is obviously very strained for everybody at the moment, working from the corridor or from your daughter's bedroom.
That's it, yeah.
um, I suppose when we're talking about bounce back ability, having everything in place, having a plan, having an area that you can work from undisturbed, and having actions that if you've got other people in the family members in the house, you've got something for them to keep them busy. These are all things, if we want to be successful, you have to put into thought.
Absolutely, it is. It's something you need to think about as your current working environment, but it's also kind of worth taking stock in a broader sense about, you know, is this a job that I've fallen into? Is it giving me what I need, what I want from a job, from a career? Do I feel that my, you know, principles are aligned? All these different things that we've talked about so far. Is this meeting my needs today and tomorrow as well? So it's just really taking stock of all of those things. And you know, at the moment, as you say, we're in such an unusual situation and everybody's making the best of a bad situation. So we're kind of getting through. Once we get through the other side, though, I think there will be a lot of people who start to think about, is this really what I want to do? Is this what I want to spend my time doing? It's kind of forcing us to take stock. but truly resilient people do that on a regular basis, really. They keep examining all of these things. You know, it's a continuous cycle, almost doing an audit on a regular basis to say, do I have everything in place that I need to make me resilient, and taking charge, managing it in quite a proactive way, rather than waiting for things to happen and then having to react to it.
That's a very good point. Very good point. So the last thing we're going to look at is this model that we use in many of our courses in many different situations. I think it really is a useful thing to, when we're talking about resilience and we're challenging ourselves, we're trying to work on a growth mindset. This really helps put things into order. It's called the circle of control, and it focuses on these three things in the middle that you can see. So the first circle is all about things that you can control. And then the next circle is about things that you can influence. And then the third circle, the bigger circle, is things all about that are not in your control, things that you can't do anything about. And I think sometimes when people have got a little bit of a fixed mindset, it's fair to say that they would start to worry about things that are not in their control. So we're going to try and do a little bit of an exercise here. We'll start off with an easy one, really. So COVID-19, Mandy, where would you see that lying in the circle of control?
Yeah, COVID-19 is definitely something that we will put in the outer circle. It's of concern to us, but it is something we have no control over. So the disease itself has happened. The impact, some of the impacts we might have some influence or some control over, but the disease itself, we certainly have no control over it at the moment. So definitely in that outer circle. But it is something that we're finding ourselves putting an awful lot of energy and time into focusing on, you know, and sometimes that can be really unhelpful if we start almost obsessing or ruminating on these things, because it's wasted energy. It's not something we can actually do anything about.
So that leads nicely into the next one. So my actions, where would that fall into it?
So that's definitely in the center circle for me. So those are something that we can control. That's something over which we have direct influence and power. So we can do something about that. So our actions, our reactions, if you like, as well, to what's going on at the moment are something that we can choose to do something about in a very decisive way. So I'm going to just pick up on the next one, Gareth, how much I watch the news, just linked into COVID-19. It might be something, you know, news is on 24/7 now. It's accessible via TV, obviously via social media and so on. And it's one of those things we could be tempted just to get sort of sucked into watching, to obsessing over all of the time, which is not really healthy for us. It's not great for our resilience. So it's taking some control over that. So I might decide to limit myself to 1 hour of news a day, or watching the news twice a day. So those are things I can choose to do something about. I have direct control over.
So when we're talking about working from home and other people being around, not our work colleagues, just family members that could be in the same areas, the actions of other people, where does that fit in it? I would, you know, is it something that we have no control over whatsoever, what other people do? Or is there something?
Yeah. And, you know, for some people, we won't have any control over their actions at all. But if you're talking about sort of family members, people you're sharing a space with, I would say you can put that within the influence. So although you don't have direct control over what they do, over their own actions, because only they have control over those, we can perhaps influence those. So in the way that we communicate with them, perhaps in sort of role modeling behavior and those sorts of things, can influence somebody else and their actions. So I think at best we can kind of put it in there. For some people, we might have no control over that at all. You know, for people that we pass in the street who are not observing social distancing, that type of thing, we don't really have any control over that. So that can be really frustrating. But if we spend all of our time obsessing about that, it's not going to be helpful for us. So influencing and spending a little bit of our focus on influence, that's okay. That's a positive thing to do.
So when we're talking about resilience then, and we're saying that it's things that we can learn, I'm going to go a little bit left field here and throw three things at you that aren't on the list. So the three I'm choosing is past, present, and future. So tell me right now, where would they fit on these circles?
So the past, you have no control to change it. I'm afraid it is what it is. It's never going to change. We don't have a time machine. We can't hop into that and go back and make changes. So we have no control over that. And again, it is one of those things, that can lead to a lack of resilience and can be harmful to our mental well-being. Is that if we ruminate and if we obsess about things in our past, which we have no control to change, then that can be really unhelpful.
Mhm.
So what about the present then? Well, our present influence, yep, certainly parts of it we can, and parts of it are within our control as well. So the way that we react to the present, the actions that we choose to take, our words and behaviors, those sorts of things, our diet, the amount of how active we are, that type of thing, we can absolutely control, and we can sort of influence aspects of it as well, because our present isn't just us in isolation. It's other people around us as well, other things we need to deal with. So we might be able to influence part of that too. There will be bits that are outside of our control as well, things that we have to deal with that we might be concerned about, but over which we have no control. The future, that's a really interesting one, isn't it? It's not something that we can predict with any certainty. Even we've got the weather on there. Even the weather people, well trained as they are, sometimes get it wrong. So we're not in that, we don't have that ability to control that. But we certainly can influence that by the decisions that we make today, by some of the plans that we put in place. We can influence our own personal futures, I think. And that's probably the best that we can say about that.
So the main takeaway from this model, I think, is that we should identify things that are not in our control, but we shouldn't be concentrating on them too much. The things that we should be really concentrating on are the things that we can influence, and ultimately the things that we can control.
Absolutely. And we find that our resilience is affected, our outlook is affected, our sense of well-being is affected in a really positive way if that's where we choose to put our energies.
So this is coming up to the conclusion. We've put this little slide over here. We've got my pictures over the top of it, so you can't actually see it, but it says resilience is shaped over time by our reactions to difficult events we face and situations that we find ourselves in. Try using the circle of control to identify areas that you can build on the following. Reverts back to the original 5 points that we identified earlier on. Confidence, intelligence, problem solving, having a positive outlook, so that's going into the growth mindset, and then being forward thinking.
Absolutely. And whether that's in relation to your career resilience, your resilience at work, or whether that's in terms of your broader resilience, looking at that final model that we looked at there, it's taking a bit of an audit and thinking about, well, how well do we think we're doing with these different aspects of our resilience at the moment? Where could we make improvements? And what things might we let go of as well?
Absolutely. So questions, over to you. Anybody who's been watching this and has any questions, please get in touch with us at training@ilisten.im, and we will definitely try to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. We do hope you found today's session useful, and please feel free to have a look at some of the other videos that we've shared on our YouTube channel as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.